In the modern web, responsiveness is so important that your website needs to respond to different devices with different screen size. So in this video, we're going to build a modern and professional website using HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. We're going to work with different sections like hero area, about us, accommodations, and testimonial. We're also going to add some animation and use a little bit of JavaScript to make the header always stay on top. And we're going to use the mobile first approach. And lastly, we're going to deploy the website using GitHub page. So before getting started, be sure to check out the description to download the resources as well as check out the design. But otherwise, if you're ready, let's get started. If you download and open the project, you could find an images folder with all the images that we need and also an index.html file. You also notice here that I am using a live server so that whenever we change something, the page would be reloaded. You also find an Figma link to the design. If you open the design link, you could find something like this. If you need more time to look into the project, feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, let's get started. We're going to start with the hero area, which is this part. And there are a few things that you need to know when working with Figma. First, when you select an element, you can see its content, typography, and color. And when you hover on another element, you can see the spacing between the selected element and the hovered element. You can play around more with Figma, but if you're ready, let's go to Visual Studio Code and start coding. In the index.html, let's start off by creating a new div and name it hero area. Inside it, let's create a new header. And inside the header, we're going to have the logo and the button. So let's go to the images folder, and in the logo.svg, let's copy this and paste it here, and I save that. You will not see anything yet in the browser because it is white. So let's continue with the button. So I'm going to create a new button, and I'm going to name this button reservation. Inside the button, we need an icon, so I'm going to create a new tab. In the new tab, let's say Google icon, W3 school, and with the first link, let's go there. I'm going to copy this to import the Google font, and in here, let's paste it in the head. So over here, and in order to use the icon, we can do something like this. So I'm going to copy this, and you can also find all the Google icons over here as well. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Inside the button, let's paste it here, and we're going to use bookmark border icon, and let's save that. And I'm going to put a text reservation here as well, and let's save that. Now we have the icon and the button. Let's move on. Under the header, let's create a new section. Inside the section, let's create a new H1, and I'm going to name it main heading. And let's go to Figma and select the element and copy its content. I'm also going to move this to my second screen so that I can see it better. And let's go back to Visual Studio Code and copy the content here. Under the H1, let's create a new button. I'm going to name this Adventure. And in here, we're going to have the adventure text and then the icon. So let's copy this. This time, the icon could be play circle field. Under the button, let's create a new form and let's name it booking. And we don't need the action for now. Inside the booking, we're going to have two elements. The first one would be booking input, and the second one would be booking button. So let's create a button and name it booking button. And the button could have a text book now. And inside the input, let's create three input. So first, let's start off with a div, and let's say booking input. And inside the input, we're going to have a label. And the first input would be check-in. And the text could be check-in as well. And let's create a new input with a type of date and also give an ID of check-in. So the same with the for attribute in the label. Alright, so now we have a check-in input, which is a date input. So let's copy this input one time, and this time let's say checkout, and this also going to be a date input, and let's paste it another time, and this time we're going to have here a person, so it could be like a number person, and here also person. Alright, so instead of input for the person, let's use select here, and we're going to have 4 options. So let's say option time 4. Alright, so the name would be person numbers, and the ID would be person, and the first option would be 1 adult, the second would be 2 adult, the next one would be 3 and 4, and let's give it the value of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, if we save that, we have 3 input, and this one would be a drop down. Alright, so now we have all the HTML element for the hero areas, so let's move on to the CSS. Alright, so let's create a new file, and name is style.css, and in the index.html, in here in the head, let's say link CSS to import the CSS, and in the style.css, the first thing I want to do is select everything, and we want to reset every element to have box sizing to be border box, and the font to be inherit, as well as the color to be inherit. Alright, and next let's select the body. In here I want to remove the default margin, so let's say margin 0, and also I want to give every element a color of, let's say 222, so that like it doesn't have the dark black anymore. And we need some font, so let's go to the browser and let's open the new tab and let's say Google font, and in here let's search for Poppin, which will be our main font, and let's just select the, let's say medium for now, and let's go back to the home page. The second font that we need to import is Fair Display, so let's also just import the medium, and let's import by copying this and paste it in our CSS. Alright, so now we have the font. Let's go back to the Google font page and let's copy this one, and in the body let's paste it here. Alright, so now if you see here, the font has changed, and before continue, let's add some variable by saying root, and the first one would be primary color, and if you go to Figma and select the button, for example, and let's copy this orangish color and let's paste it here. This would be our primary color, and the second variable we want to have is a heading font. This one would be the Playfair, so let's go back here and copy this and paste it here. Alright, so let's continue by selecting the hero area. In here, let's give it a background image, and let's import the image by saying URL, and let's say images, image 1, and let's also change the text color to be white by saying color white. And if we save that, the contrast between the text and the background is not enough, so before the URL, let's say linear gradient, and let's say RGBA 0, 0, 0, and 0.75, and it's going to add the same color, so copy one more time. So now you can see that the background has an overlay of black with the opacity of 75%. So this is what we want, so let's move on. You also notice here that we have no spacing around the content, and also if we make the screen bigger, the content is always taking 100% of the screen width. So to fix this, let's go back to the index.html, and in the hero area, let's create a new div and name it container, and let's paste everything inside the container. Alright, so in the CSS, let's select the container, and let's give it a max width of, let's say, 1200 pixel. And let's also add the padding of 24 pixel. Alright, and let's also center the content by saying margin 0 out 2. And now if we save that and make the screen bigger, now the content is always in the middle and take the maximum width of 1200 pixel. Alright, so let's change this back. The next thing we want to do is to style the header. So let's select the hero area header. In here, let's say display to be flex, and we want to align the content to be center vertically. So let's say align item center. And also we want to have space between the elements. So let's say justify content, space between. Alright, so this is what we wanted. And let's select the reservation button by saying reservation. And we're going to say background color to be the primary color. And we don't want the border, so let's say border none. And we want to have some padding, so let's say padding. Top bottom would be 12 pixel and left and right would be 24 pixel. Alright, and let's give it some border radius as well. And this time, let's say 50 pixel, so it will be really rounded. And then also let's say display to be flex. And let's enter the content inside it vertically by saying align item center. Alright, and we know that there is only one icon inside the button. So let's say reservation, select the I tag and say margin right to be, let's say 8 pixel. Alright, it looks good. And let's also make the text to be uppercase. So let's say text transform uppercase. And let's make the font size a bit smaller by saying font size 0.875 rem, so it's around 14 pixel. Alright, it looks good now. Alright, so let's continue by selecting the main heading. In here, let's say font family to be the heading font, and then the font size to be 3.25 rem, and then the font weight to be 700. And we don't have the font weight of 700 yet for the heading font. So in the import for the Playfair display, we also want to add 700 after 500. And because I know that we're going to use 400, so I'm going to import that as well. And also for the pop-in, I also want to have 400 and 600 font weight as well. Alright, so if we save that, you notice here that the reservation button now have the font weight of 400 by default. So we want to change it to 500 by saying font weight 500. And now it looks better. So let's move on to the adventure button. So let's select the adventure button by saying adventure. In here, let's remove the background by saying background color transparent, and then the border to be none, the padding to be 0, and cursor pointer as well. And I don't want to do the reset for every single button, so I'm going to remove this. And for every button at the beginning, we're going to reset it. Alright, so now it looks better. And let's go back to the adventure. In here, let's say text transform to be capitalized, and then we want it to be centered vertically. So let's say display flex and align item center. Alright, and then let's select the icon by saying adventure I and give it a margin left of, let's say 12 pixel. Alright, and let's also add some padding for it. Let's say 10 pixel, and let's make it a bit bigger by saying font size 2.5 rem. Alright, And then let's add border by saying border 1 pixel, solid, and then white. Alright, looks good. And then let's add the border radius. This time let's add 50%. Alright, looks quite good. Alright, so before moving on, in our CSS, I'm going to select the section and I'm going to give it padding of, let's say, 74 pixel on the top and the bottom, and 0 on the left and right. Alright, it looks good now. Alright, so let's move on to the booking form. So let's select booking. In here, first I want to give it a margin top of 100 pixel. And then I'm going to select the booking input. And in here, let's give it a background color of white. And then color to be 222. The padding would be 24 pixel. Border radius 8 pixel. Alright, looks good. And then next, let's select the booking input. First, let's select the label. The label would have the font size of, let's say, 0.25 rem. And then a text transform could be uppercase. The color should be BD, and BD. And let's say font weight 500. Alright, looks good. And then let's select the input by saying booking input. And we also want to select the select tag. So let's say booking input select. In here, let's say display to be block, and then width 100%, border none. Alright, looks good. And let's also give it some padding. So let's say padding top and bottom 8 pixel, left and right 0. Yeah, looks good. And let's go back to the booking input. In here, I want to say display to be grid, and then let's give it a gap of 24 pixel. Yeah, it's a bit too big, so let's say 16 pixel. Yeah, looks good now. So let's select the button by saying booking button. In here, I want to say background color to be primary color, so let's say primary here. And padding would be now 40 pixel, and border radius should be 8 pixel. Alright, and then the font weight should be now 500, and it should be uppercase, so let's say text transform uppercase. Alright, looks good now. And let's also give it a margin top 12 pixel. And we are missing the box shadow, so let's go to Figma, select the element and copy this box shadow, and let's paste it here. Alright, it looks good now, but on bigger screen it does not look like what we wanted yet. And you also notice here that the background is now repeating. So let's go back to hero area. In here, let's say background repeat, no repeat. And we want the background to take all the space as well. So let's say background size, let's say cover. Alright, and it also say background position to be center, so that it will expand from the center. Alright, it looks good now. And also the main heading is too wide, so let's go to main heading, and in here let's say max inline size to be 620 pixel. Alright, yeah, it looks better now. And I also wanted to change this to be 500, so let's go to booking input select. In here let's say font weight to be 500, and I also wanted to have cursor pointer here as well. So let's check it out. Yeah, Alright, looks better now. And in here, let's say media, and if the screen is bigger than let's say 760 pixel, we're going to select the booking input. In here, let's say display to be grid, and we want to have 3 columns, so let's say grid template column. We're going to repeat 3 times one function. Alright, looks good now. And let's also remove the gap, and instead of using gap, let's select every input, and let's give them padding left and right of 24 pixels, so let's say 0, 24 pixel. And let's also give it a border left of 1 pixel solid, and the color would be 0. Alright, looks good now. And we don't want the border and the margin on the first item, so let's say booking input, the first child, we're going to remove the border, and the padding left would be 0, and same with the last child, we would remove the padding right, so in here last child, padding right would be 0, and we still want to have the border. Alright, it looks good now. And when the screen getting bigger, let's also move this button on the same line with the form. So let's make it smaller here, and let's say media, and if the screen is, let's say, bigger than 1020 pixels, then we going to select the booking, and let's say display flex here, and we also wanted to select the button, so let's say booking button, and let's remove the margin top, and let's give it a margin right, not margin left of, let's say, 12 pixels. Alright, looks good now, and yeah, it's responsive. And now we are done with the hero area. Let's move on to the next part. So before moving on to the about section, let's try to organize the code a bit better. You can see here that we use a lot of 24 pixel, 12 pixel, and then 8 pixel. So in the root, we want to create variable, and let's say space, let's start from extra small, it would be 8 pixel, space small would be 12 pixel, space medium would be, let's say, 16 pixel, space large would be 24 pixel, space let's say extra large would be now 40 pixel, and space 2 extra large would be 74 pixel. Alright, so let's try to use that. First, this one, we're going to use space 2 extra large, and for 24, it will be large, and for 12, I think it's going to be a small, and then here would be large. Alright, and in here it should be small, and let's leave out 10 because we don't have that, and 24 here should be large, and here should be extra large. Alright, and here as well, small, and here should be large, and here it should be small. Alright, so now it should look the same. And before the hero area here, I want to say hero area, and let's comment it out. And same with the index.html. In here, before the hero area, let us also say hero area, and let's comment it out as well, so that the code would be much easier to read. And after the hero area, so around here, let's say here about us, And let's comment out the hero area so that we have a blank space when working with About Us. Alright, so for the About Us, first let's create a new section. In here we're going to have the container, so let's say div container. In the container we're going to have a div, and let's name this section name, and in here it will be About Us. Alright, and then next we're going to have an add to, and let's go to Figma and select the element and copy its content and paste it here. And next we're going to have the B tab, and I'm going to move this to my second screen so I can see it better. I'm going to copy the text here, and after this we're going to have an image, so it could be images and image2.png. Alright, looks good now. And this one would be About Us 1. Next we're going to have two paragraphs, so let's say P here. Let's copy the text, paste it here, and another P, copy the text and paste it here. Alright, we're going to have another image as well, so image, so it would be images image3.png. This one would be About Us 2. Alright, now we have it. Let's move on to the styling. So in the style.css, in here, let's say About Us, and let's comment it out. First, we're going to select the section name. This one would have the text transform, uppercase, and then the color should be, let's say, BD. Right, looks good. And then font weight should be now 500. And let's try to and let's also add the font size to be, let's say, 0.875 rem, so 14 pixel. Yeah, it looks good. And for the add to, do we have the name for that? No, we don't have the name for that yet. So in here I'm going to say class name About Us. So we're going to select the add to by saying About Us, and add to the font size should be, let's say, 3 rem. Need too big, so let's say 2.5 rem. Alright, and the font family should be now the heading font, and the font weight should be now 500. Yeah, actually let's try to have 700 here. Yeah, it looks better. And for the P tag, so let's say About, and select the P. We're going to give it a color. Let's check out the color. It should be add to, and add to. Alright, looks good. And I'm going to remove all the default padding and margin from the P tag. So let's say margin 0. And the same thing with the heading. And we're going to handle the spacing by using the grid. But first we need to go back to the index.html, and after the section name we want to create a new div, and let's name this About Us content. And let's paste everything inside. Alright, and in the CSS let's select the About Us content. First, let's say margin top to be space large, and then we want to say display to be grid, and gap should be now space large as well, so 20 pixel, 24 pixel. Alright, looks pretty good. And let's also select all the images. So let's say about us image, and let's give it a border radius 8 pixel, and let's give it a width of 100% as well. Yeah, it looks good now. And let's make the screen a bit bigger. In here, we want to have 2 columns. So let's say media, if the screen is bigger than 760 pixel, let's say about us content, and grid template column, we're going to have 2 columns, so one function. And now you can see that it has 2 columns, but it doesn't look like what we wanted. So let's go back to index.html, and in here I'm going to create another div inside the content, and this time we're going to name it about us content, and this would be left, and I'm going to have the heading, the first paragraph, and the image in the content left, and another div, it could be about us content right, and this one would have the 2 paragraph and the image. Now if we save that, we don't have any spacing anymore, so in here we need to select the about us content left, and also the about us content right. In here we also want to display to be grid, and the gaps should also be space large. Alright, it looks good now. And what we want to do is that we want to have this image at the top, right, when the screen is bigger than 760 pixel. So in here, let's select the about us content, right, and we know that there is only one image in the content, right, so let's select the image, and in here let's say order to be -1. Alright, it looks good, and let's try to make the screen a bit smaller to see if it works. Yeah, it works fine, and let's make it a lot bigger. And actually I want to change the gap between 2 columns to be extra large. Yeah, looks better now. And that's it for the about us. So let's move on to the next section. Alright, so next we're going to work with the accommodation section. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. The first thing we want to do is to comment out the about section. And let's copy this. And in here, let's say accommodation. And first, let's create a new section with the accommodation class. And in here, we're going to have and in here, we're also going to have the container. So let's say div.container. And the first thing we're going to have is the section name. So let's say div.section name. This one could be accommodation. Alright, and we're also going to have an A2. And let's copy the text. And alright, after this, I want to create a new div with a class of accommodation header. And inside this, we're going to have 2 elements, A2, and let's copy the text. So select the element and copy the content. and also a button, and let's name this a text button. And in here we're going to have the text CR, and the icon should be, let's say, icon material icon, and this icon is going to be trending flat. Alright, now we have it. And after the header, let's create a new div with a class of stay to hold the card. Inside the stay div, let's create a new div with class of stay card. And inside the stay card, we're going to have an image. And you might think that we should use a background image for the stay card, but it actually is better to use an image tag here, as it would be better for the search engine and the image is related to the content. So let's say here image, and the source would be images and stay one, and the text would be stay one as well. Alright, and in here we also going to have the name. So let's say div.stayCard and name, and let's check the Figma for the name, and I'm going to move this on my second screen. The first one would be Sea View Apartment. Copy that and paste it here. And after this, we want to have a new div with class of, let's say, stay card. This one would be price, and the price would be 549 euros. And I want to put the name and the price in one div. So let's say a div here, and let's say stay card details, and let's paste it inside. Alright, so now we have the card. Let's copy it several times. So we have the other card as well. So let's paste one time. This one would be stay 2 here, and the name of the card 2 would be whole house, and it would be 349. Alright, and let's paste another time. This one would be 3 here, 3 here, and then it would be minimal room. Alright, and this one would be 149. And paste it another time. This one would be 4 would be rural house, and 129. And next we're going to have modern house. So this one will be the last. So 5 here, 5 here, and this one would be modern house, and it would be 229. Alright, so now we have all the elements needed. Let's go to CSS and start styling this. So in the CSS, first let's say here accommodation, and let's comment it out. And the first thing we want to do is to style the header. So let's say here accommodation header. First we're going to give it a margin top of, let's say, space medium. Alright, and then for the H2, we're going to select that. And if you remember, we also have the H2 for the About Us as well, and it's going to have, and it has the same style. So I'm going to put the H2 on the top over here, and I'm going to copy the style of the H2 in the About Us section. So this one, I'm going to just remove this and paste it into the H2 over here. Alright, so now we have it. Let's try to style the See All Rooms button. And this one is going to be a text button. So let's just say text button here. It's going to have the color of the primary color. And let's say display to be flex, and align item to be center. And let's select the icon by saying text button I, and margin left should be, let's say, space small. Yeah, looks good. And let's continue by selecting the stays. In the stay, we want to have a margin top. Let's say space large. Alright, looks good now. And we're going to select the card by saying stay card. In here, the first thing I want to do is give it some border radius, 8 pixel, and overflow would be hidden. Alright, so now I want this part to be over here, so I'm gonna say stay card and select the details. The detail going to have position to be absolute, and bottom should be space medium, actually space large, and then left should be space medium. Let's save that. And in order to make it work, we need to put the position relative to the stay card, which is the parent element. Alright, so now it's work. And let's also give it color here, white. Alright, looks good now. And you can see here that the image does not take the full width and height of the container yet. So in here we can give the stay card a height of, let's say, 280 pixel. And then we're going to select the image and give it a width 100% and the height of 100% as well. And if we save that, now the images take the full width and height of each content, but now it's distorted. So to fix this, we can say object fit to be cover, and now it works. And we also want to say object position to be center, so it's going to be expand from the center. Alright, it works quite nicely. Next, let's select the name by saying here stay card and select the name. For the name, we're going to say font family should be let's say heading font, and the font weight should be 700, and the font size should be, let's say, 2.5 rem, actually 1.5 rem. Alright, looks good. And then let's give it some margin bottom as well, and this time let's give it a space, let's say small. Yeah, looks about right. And then let's select the price by saying stay card price. In here, the font weight now should be 500. Alright, it looks good. And we need to have some contrast between the text and the background, and we cannot do the same thing with the background image. So in order to have the same effect, we can go to the stay card, and in here we're going to create a new element by saying here before, and we're going to give it a content of nothing, and then similarly we're going to say position to be absolute, top would be 0, left would be 0, width should be 100%, and height also should be 100%. Alright, and then we're going to give it some background by saying here linear, and it's going to start from, let's say, RGBA 0, 0, 0, and 0, so totally transparent to totally dark, and let's say 1 here. Alright, now it works, and we want to have some space between the card. So in the stays, we can say here display to be grid, and gap it should be, let's say, space large for example. Yeah, it looks quite good. Actually, let's say extra large. Yeah, it looks better. And let's make the screen a bit bigger. So in the tablet, which is bigger than 760 pixel, so we can say here media min width 760 pixel, 760 pixel, and then we're going to select the states. Instead of one column, we're going to say grid template column. We're going to have two columns, so let's say one fraction. Yeah, and look quite nice. And we want to have the first card to take two columns. We can use first child here, but I want to add a new class so that like later on, if we want to use the class for other element, we can use the same class. So for the first stay card, I'm going to say stay card, and this one would be call to, and let's copy this, and in the style.css over here, let's say grid column. Now it should start from 1 and then span 2. Alright, it looks good. And let's make the screen even bigger now, so more than 1020 pixel. In here we want to have 3 columns, so let's copy this and change this to be 1020 pixel. In here the stay now should have 3 columns, so let's copy this and add one more fraction. Yeah, it looks quite good. Before adding some animation to the stay card, there is one mistake that I made. The card is supposed to be a clickable element, so we should use an A tag here instead of a div. So let's change this to be A tag, and let's also add an href as well. Alright, so in here, let's change it to A here, and href, and A here as well. A here as well, and A here as well. Alright, so now it has the cursor pointer as it an A tag right now. So let's go to the style.css. So when we hover the stay card, so let's say over here. So when we hover the stay card, we're going to select the before, and we're going to say opacity should be now 0. Alright, and let's add some transition here for the before. So let's say transition opacity 200 millisecond and ease in out. Alright, let's set that. Alright, looks good. And then we want to animate the name enterprise. So in here we can say stay card. When we hover, we're going to select the stay card name, and we're going to say transform translate x, and we're going to say minus 100% here. And if we hover it, there's still something here. It's because the space of the margin. So what we can do to fix it is in here we can say calculate, and it will be minus 100% and minus the space, let's say large here, and let's delete this. And now when we hover it, we cannot see the text anymore. And similarly, we want to do the same thing with the label with the price as well. Alright, so when we hover it, we cannot see anything. And let's also add some transition to the name and the price as well. And this time would be transform. Alright, yeah, it looks good. And I want to make the price to have a delay of, let's say, 100 millisecond. Yeah, it looks lively now. And that's it for the accommodation section. Let's move on to the next part. Alright, so for the next part, we're going to work with the testimonial section. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and in the index.html, let's comment out the accommodation section. And let's say here, testimonial. Alright, let's comment it out as well. In here, let's create a new section with the Testimonial class. And inside this section, let's create a new div with the container class. And first, we need to have the section name. So let's say div section name, and this would be testimonial. Alright, looks good. And then after this, we want to have an add to, and let's go to Figma, select the element and copy the content. And you also notice that the client has the different color, so I'm going to use strong tag here and put the client inside. Next, we're going to have a list of feedback, so I'm gonna say here a div with the class of feedback, and inside this we're going to have let's say div with the class of feedback card. Inside the card, we're going to have two elements. The first one would be feedback card dialog, and the second one would be feedback card user. Alright, and in the dialog, we're going to have first, let's say feedback card dialog. We're going to have the title, and let's go to Figma, and I'm going to move this again to my second screen. Let's copy the text. It's gonna be amazing hotels, and we're going, no, it's the wrong place in the title. And after the title, we're going to have the content, so let's copy this and change it to be content, and let's also copy the text over. Alright, looks good. And then in the user, we're going to have an image. This is going to be images and person 1, and in here let's say person 1. Alright, and after this I'm going to create a new div with a class of, let's say, feedback card user details, and inside the detail we're going to have the first div would be username, and the second div would be user location, and the first name would be, let's copy the text, Miller Stark, and he from Finland. Alright, looks good. And let's try to copy the card 2 times. So let's copy this and paste it 1 time. This one would be, let's say, best experience, and the contents could be the same. The name would be Zara, and she's from Canada. Alright, and the image would be person 2, and let's copy it another time. This time is going to be I will be back for the title, person 3, person would be Jackson Nguyen, and he from Vietnam. Alright, looks good. And now we have everything in the HTML. Let's go to the CSS and start styling this. First, let's add the testimonial text here, and let's comment it. First, we want to change the client text to have the primary color. So I'm going to move to the top, and let's say after the add to, I'm going to say strong. The strong tag is going to have the color of, let's say, primary color. Alright, looks good. And let's go back to the testimonial. In here, we can select the feedback, and let's give it a margin top of, let's say, space 2 extra large. Yeah, and then we're going to select the feedback card, and first let's select the dialog, the dialog is going to have the background color of white, and padding, let's say space large. Alright, and we also need to change the background of the testimonial as well. So let's select the testimonial, and if you check the Figma, the background would be F2. So let's say background color F2. Alright, looks good. And then we need to give some border radius for the dialog. So in here, let's say border radius. The first one would be 20 pixels. So top left 20, top right 20 pixels, bottom right would be 20 pixels, and bottom left would be 0. And we also need to have some box shadow. So I'm going to go to Figma, select the element, and copy the box shadow. Oh, it looks good. And let's also give it a font family of the heading font. Yeah, looks good. And let's select the title by saying feedback card dialog title. The title is going to have a font weight, let's say 700, and let's give it some margin bottom, let's say space medium. Yeah, looks good. And for the feedback dialog content, if you check the Figma again, it's going to have the color of 4F and the line height of 180%. Alright. Yes, it looks good now, and let's move on to the user part. So let's say feedback card user. In here, we want to say display to be grid, and we want to have 2 columns. So let's say a grid template column. The first column would be the image. So I'm going to give it like 52 pixels. Let's see how it goes. And then the second one would be one fraction. Now it does not work yet, so we need to select the image by saying feedback card user, and take the image, and width should be now 100%. Alright, looks good. And for the feedback card user, let's also add some margin top, and let's say space medium. Yeah, looks quite okay. And also let's give it a gap of, let's say, space medium as well. Yeah, looks good. And let's select the name of the user. So let's say feedback card user name. This one would have the font weight of 500. Yeah, and then the location. So let's say user location. This one have color. What is the color? BD. And the font size of 0.75 rem, so 12 pixels. Alright, and for the feedback, let's also say here that we want it to display grid, and let's give a gap of, let's say, space extra large. Yeah, it looks good, but actually I want to give the dialog a little bit more spacing. So in the dialog, I want it to have the spacing top and bottom extra large, and then left and right would be space large only. Yep, I think it looks better. And let's make the screen a bit bigger as well. And now around here, we want to have 3 columns. So let's go to the bottom and say media, and if the grid is bigger than 760 pixels, we want to, I guess, be mid width. We want to select the feedback, and let's say grid column template with template column, we want to have 3 columns. So repeat 3 times, one function. Alright, I think it looks good. Yeah, so now we are done with the testimonial, and let's actually quickly add a footer. So let's go to the index.html, and below this section, let's actually add a footer. And we also want to use a container, so let's also add the container here as well. And inside the container, let's add the text, and let's copy it from Figma. And you can use your own name or your own website, but you can also use my name if you want to. And in here, let's actually say footer and give it a font family of, let's say, heading font. Alright. Right, so now we have everything. Let's go back to the index.html and let's uncomment everything that we have done. So here as well. And here as well. Alright, so now we have our website and it is responsive. And there's some animation as well. So the next thing we want to do is to make the header always stay on top, and it will require some JavaScript. Alright, so let's go back to our index.html. In the hero area, before the container, let's create a new div. And this one would have the class of top header. In here, it's also going to have a div with the class of container. And let's remove the header here and paste it in the top header. Alright, so now it still looks the same. And let's go to the style.css. In here, let's select the top header. And let's give it a position to be fixed. And let's give it a width of 100% as well. Yeah, it looks good now. But then when we scroll down, because the logo is white, so you cannot see the logo all the time. So let's go back to our CSS, and in here let's create a new class, and let's say top header, and let's say white background, and let's give it a background color white. And let's copy this class and paste it to the top header. Alright, now we have it, but now you can see that the logo also white, so you cannot see anything, and the padding is quite big here. So let's go back to the CSS. In here, let's say top header white background, and we're going to select all the path, and let's give it let's say fill primary color, and let's also select the top header container and give it a padding top of space small, and the padding bottom of space small as well. Alright, now it looks better. And let's also add some box shadow as well. And because we don't have this in the design, so I'm going to use the box shadow in the feedback card. So let's copy this and paste it in here. And instead of 0.05 opacity, I'm going to increase it to be 0.5. And it worked quite nice. But if we go over the room, now this is like on top of the navigation. So to fix this, we can go here and say test index to be 1. Alright, it works now. But at the beginning, I don't want this to have the white background. So let's go back to the index.html and let's remove this and add an ID of top header as well, to make sure that we only have one top header in the page. And before ending the body tags, let's add a new script tag. In here, let's say window dot on scroll, and this will equal to a function. So when we scroll, we're going to check if the window dot pay y offset, if it's more than 50, then we're going to get the top header, and we can say document get element by ID, and we're going to say top header here, and we're going to get the class list, and we're going to add the top header y background class. Alright, and otherwise we're going to remove it. Alright, so let's save that and let's go down. Yeah, it's working quite nice. And to make it look better, let's go to the style.css and let's add some transition. So in the top header, let's say here transition background color 300 milliseconds, easy now, and it's going to be the same for the box shadow as well. For the path, let's also copy this and paste it here and change background to be filled, and I save that and let's try it out. Alright, so it works perfectly. So the next step is to check if this works for other browsers as well. So let's move on. Alright, so you can see now that I have 3 browsers, Chrome, Firefox and Safari. On Chrome and Firefox, everything works perfectly, but on Safari, the date input does not work, and unfortunately Safari does not support date input. But one thing we can do is that if we go back to our HTML and go to the booking, and in the date input we can actually give it a default value. Let's say here 20, 20, 12 and 20 here, and we also can add the mean value as well. So let's copy this and paste it and change it to mean, and similarly we're going to copy this to the checkout input, and instead of 20 I'm going to say 21 here. If we save that and go to our browser, now the date input is not empty anymore, and it also validate the input in Firefox and in Chrome. So the next step is to deploy this website, and let's see how we can do that. So in order to deploy the website, first we need to create a new repository on GitHub. So under github.com/new, let's create a new repo and let's give it a name of HiMos responsive. And all we have to do is to follow the instruction here. So let's actually copy this line, git remote add, and let's go to Visual Studio Code. In here, let's open the terminal and let's say git init and git add. We're going to add everything, and let's make a new commit by saying git commit upload HiMos. Alright, and now we have it. Now next, let's paste the comment that we copied from the GitHub page and press enter. And the last step is say git push, and let's copy this and paste it. Alright, so it takes a few seconds to push it to GitHub. Alright, so on GitHub you can see that the file is uploaded, and if we go to setting and if we scroll down a bit, and in the GitHub page we can select the master branch and we click save, and then if we scroll down again, and now we have the page, but it's going to take a few minutes, so let's wait for it. Alright, so now it's deployed and you can see the site. Alright, so that's it for the video. I hope you enjoy it, and if you haven't yet, check out devchallenges.io, follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, stay safe and happy coding, and see you in the next video.